earlier this week, President Joe Biden announced that he is in fact extending this pause on the federal student loan payments, and turns out that people like Jeanine Pirro are not too happy about it because they want to crush the students who own all sorts of student loans that are, kind of making life a lot more difficult for them, especially with things like inflation happening in our economy. Now, Jeanine Pirro explains her reasoning behind this in the next video. Let's watch.
Progressives want full cancellation of $1.6 trillion in student debt. Now, think about this. We've got 11.3 million job openings.
Yep.
Wages are on the rise. Certainly not enough to keep up with inflation, but more than enough jobs for these people to get a job and pay back their student loans, okay? So the delay itself that Biden has been granting, I don't know if this is the fourth or the sixth, is costing the government something like $100 billion so far because nobody's making any payments.
Oh, Jeanine Pirro is concerned about revenue for the federal government. I mean, no mention about the $2 trillion that the federal government is missing out on following Trump's tax cuts for the rich. $2 trillion, no complaints from Jeanine Pirro. But no, what I really appreciated about that video is how she has decided to paint student loan borrowers as bums. None of them are employed, allegedly, according to her. They're all just sitting around waiting for their student loans to get canceled. No, you mentioned inflation in the context of your stupid argument, and yet she's pretending like she doesn't know what's going on. I don't think Jeanine Pirro is that stupid, okay? I think she knows very well that student loan borrowers are working, but the fact of the matter is the amount that they owe is crippling. So much so, by the way, that even if they go bankrupt, they're not able to discharge those student loans. Student loans follow you for the rest of your life thanks to the bankruptcy bill that, by the way, Joe Biden championed decades ago. And so that kind of impact not only has a negative, overwhelming financial impact on the lives of the individuals who have borrowed money just to get an education, which by the way is required to get a decent job, that has an overall impact on the economy, a negative impact on the economy. Because when people are crushed with student loans and all of their income, or I shouldn't say all, but a huge portion of their income has to go toward paying those loans back, while also not being able to, buy other things like whether it's a house or, pay for certain education for their own kids. All of that stuff has an impact on the greater economy. They're not able to spend any disposable income on stimulating the economy, for instance. So it's just hilarious to me that she mentions inflation like, oh, I know, wages haven't kept up with inflation. We all know that, right? No, but that's not a new trend. That's something that's been going on in this country since the 1970s. And it's been exacerbated by the increased inflation that we're experiencing right now. But that's not an excuse. All of these student loan borrowers apparently are super lazy. Lazy people go to college and get an education. They're all bums. Okay, trash.
Yeah. You'll understand how right-wing commentators and Fox News hosts think if you just look at it from the context of a rich person, right? So when she says that, it doesn't make any sense to you because you're like, wait, I don't get it. I worked really hard in college, then I got a lot of debt to try to improve myself, right? And to go further in my career and to make more money, which is what Republicans want, right? They say that they want everybody to be rich, right? And they want everybody to work hard. And to get an education, that's exactly what you're doing. Then you come out of college with incredible debt and you're working super hard trying to pay off that debt. And then she calls you a bum.
That's what they think about you, but it's not just Pirro, okay? It's the right wing in general. That is what they think about you, okay? If you didn't have the luck of being born in the generation that Jeanine Pirro was born in, where college education was nearly free if you went to a public college, well then you're a lazy bum and pick yourself up by the bootstraps, and sorry, no empathy for you because they don't care to understand the differences between these two generations, the economic differences. They don't care because they got theirs. They got theirs. They want to shut the door. And I love the fact that she's bringing up the money that the federal government is missing out on here. We got to charge interest for these students. We got to, because how else are they going to generate revenue? By taxing the rich?
Exactly. So what I was going to say is that for you, it makes no sense. But if you're looking at it from a greedy rich person's perspective, it makes a lot of sense. They think, well, I want trillions of dollars in tax cuts, and I want the government to give me all the money and not you. So why would I want them to take that burden off your back? Well, number one, relative to the rest of the budget, that costs me money. And number two, you're poor or middle class. I think as a rich person, I think by definition, you're a bum. We have a meritocracy. I'm at the very top of it because I merited. I mean, granted, I inherited it and have done absolutely nothing with my life other than cocaine, but I merited it and you didn't.
Jeanine Pirro?
No, I'm saying the average rich person listening to.
Okay. I was like, oh wow, I didn't know about that.
Right.
I mean, no judgment, I guess.
No, the heirs are all. I mean, cocaine's never found a better friend than rich heirs. Yeah. Okay, and so to them, what she's saying makes perfect sense, right? And they're like, I want the tax cuts, et cetera. Now, but we're gonna turn to the Democrats here because Joe Biden not only isn't really much better, as you're gonna see in a clip here, but Joe Biden is the one that did that bill in the first place that said you cannot take that albatross off of your neck. It will haunt you forever. And why did he do that? Delaware is a huge banking state. And he was among the senators with the most amount of banking donors. So he did them a giant favor by screwing over all of you guys. And then I'm going to tell you the context of the different generations and how wrong Biden and Pirro are in a second. But first, let's watch Biden's clip from the campaign, if you remember this.
D3.
Generation tells me how tough things are. Give me a break. No, I have no empathy for it. Give me a break.
Give me a break, I have no empathy for it. Now I'm gonna jump in again, sorry Cenk. I'm filibustering the story, you're just gonna have to deal with it.
I'm dealing, go.
Okay, I'm getting real tired of, and I'm not trying to be ageist, we have lots of people in the baby boomer generation who watch the show who are wonderful progressives, but I'm specifically referring to members of the baby boomer generation who had a completely different economic situation to deal with, who had all these opportunities just handed to them in the form of higher education, where they could get an affordable education, oftentimes a free higher education, like higher degree, whether it's a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD, without having to dig themselves into a massive hole. So let's actually look at the data. Let's compare what baby boomers have experienced and what younger generations have experienced on this very specific issue of student loans. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, for the 1970 to 1971 academic year, the average in-state tuition and fees for 1 year at a public nonprofit university was $394. $394, not even $500 for a year of in-state tuition at a public nonprofit university. But by 2020, 2021, that academic year, the amount jumped to $10,560, which is an increase of, not a big deal, just 2,580%. Give me a break, no empathy, give me a break. Let me give you more though. During the same period, tuition and fees at private institutions jumped by a similarly astronomical 2,107% from $1,706 in 1970 to $37,650 in 2020. Between 1970 and 2020, the dollar had an average inflation rate of 3.87% annually, resulting in a cumulative price increase of about 567% during the last 50 years. That is what students have been dealing with. Remember, Joe Biden graduated college in 1968. Homeboy doesn't know what it's like to have to go into deep debt in order to afford a higher education. And then when you break it down, let's take a look at this graph by student loan debt from one generation to the next. You look at baby boomers, they've got a lot of student loan debt themselves to the tune of $262.2 billion. But that ain't a big deal compared to what millennials are dealing with. Millennials have outstanding student loan debt to the tune of $500.5 billion. Shockingly, Gen X is actually doing the worst. Cenk, you guys got the highest number there.
We do. Hey, that's the only time Gen X is ever mentioned in any news.
Right.
It's just like, oh, by the way, Gen X is screwed the most. Let's move on.
Yeah, totally.
And never mention them again. Okay, but by the way, all that is, that last set of numbers are slightly misleading because I looked into it more. And a lot of the older generations also have debt that they took on for their kids.
Oh, that makes sense.
Okay, and so because back then, as we just showed you earlier in the numbers, tuition was either free or next to nothing. And so now it's so much higher. I mean, there's no question about it, 567% higher, even when adjusted for inflation. So Biden is monumentally full of crap and totally out of touch. No, we have burdened the younger generations with massive, massive debt that the older generations never had to deal with. They would just get their education, it'd be nearly free, and then they'd go and buy a house for $15,000, right? And now they turn around and go, oh, I don't get it, man. Oh, the younger generations, they're all bums. What's the big deal? Yeah, that's because you didn't have $37,000 put on top of your head, which it takes decades to pay off. Houses weren't all $1 million in the coastal cities at a minimum, et cetera. So you're just
such a good point. Oh
come on. And so guess what, Biden? I have no empathy for you. You're the one who passed the worst law on this. You're the one who said that you would do $10,000 of student debt relief, and you never did it. And by the way, did it work?
Nope.
Your beloved credit that you wanted from Fox News and Republicans, did you get it? No. They just said, oh, can you believe he extended a moratorium for a little bit longer? Biden is a monster, liberal, left-winger who's encouraging all the bums. Biden, why don't you go kiss some more Republican ass and see if that works for you? My guess is, after 50 years in Washington, you're gonna get the same exact result. All they're gonna do after you kiss their ass is slap you across the face. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.